Hey guys, what's up? It's Charlie here, and today we're going to be looking at 10 scary hitchhiking stories. Have you ever been somewhere with no ride and thought about hitchhiking? Well, here are some terrifying true stories which will make it so that you never try to hitchhike again. Some of these are so crazy, so get ready. But first, be sure to subscribe, and why not press the notification bell too. Coming in at number 10, we have He's Behind You. This creepy story is coming out of Massachusetts, USA. One woman named Mindy Lawford got a flat tire and was stranded on a dark street one night. She was near her big townhouse, but not near enough to walk. One man then pulled up in a car and told her to get in for a free ride home. She hopped in the passenger seat and they started driving off. However, all of a sudden they noticed a car following them. They tried to lose the car and sped off, but the car followed them. The guy then finally pulled over and Mindy ran out of the car. The car was still following Mindy though, and eventually caught up to her, and she thought she was done for. That was when all of a sudden the man in the car said, "Ma'am, I was trying to warn you, there was a guy behind you in that car." You see, the guy, or two guys who gave her a lift, had a plan where one would get her in the car. Then the other, hiding in the back seats, would come out and take the hitchhiker's life with razor wire. The crime duo were caught a while after this, and the guy who Mindy thought was chasing them actually ended up saving her life. Next up is the inmate. Usually we're told not to hitchhike because the people who pick us up might be dangerous. But here's a story that will make sure you never pick up a hitchhiker. In the early 70s, a prison inmate named Douglas Taylor escaped from an Arizona prison and ran into the desert. He stole some regular clothes and waited on a roadside with his thumb out. One man named James Knowlton then pulled over to give him a lift, thinking he was simply a stranded citizen. Little did James know that Douglas was actually a dangerous inmate. Douglas had been in prison after he took the lives of two teenagers who went to Arizona State University. However, Douglas wasn't done and decided he wanted to do something similar to James. He asked James to pull over by a payphone so that he could make a call, but instead he took James' life with his bare hands and then stole James' clothes. To this day, Douglas is still on the loose, but it goes to show you why you should never pick up a hitchhiker, especially near a prison. Next up, we have Ben Rhodes. This man is the most famous example of why you should never ever hitchhike. Ben was a trucker who toured around America by highway. But what was he transporting? Food? Timberwood? Metals? Well, no, he wasn't transporting any goods, but instead he was stealing and transporting people. He would take many women in the back of his truck, and inside the truck he kept many weapons. He did this for 16 years until one day he parked his big rig a little too close to the shoulder of Interstate 40. A state trooper then decided to speak with Ben and asked to look inside his truck. Inside, he found a woman chained up, and she was hurt. Ben was quickly arrested and charged with taking the lives of over 50 people. He was sentenced to life without parole and is currently behind a bar in an Illinois prison. This guy sure is one of the scariest hitchhiker helpers of all time, and it's yet another reason why you should never hitchhike. Coming up next is Australian Outback. Australia is one big country, however only a few small parts of the country are actually built up. The rest is the Australian Outback, which is miles and miles of hot, dangerous desert. The desert has no water in sight and is inhabited by dangerous animals. One day a man named Tom Cartwright was hitchhiking from one town to another, which involved him going through the desert. He decided to hitchhike his way there and found a ride pretty quickly with a man named Graham Jones. However, as they were driving, they got into a political argument, which resulted in Graham kicking Tom out of the car in the middle of the outback. Tom then decided to walk back the way they drove, but he got disorientated and lost in the outback. Tom was never seen again after that, and Graham was actually charged with manslaughter. They never even found Tom, and it's gone down as one of the most haunting hitchhiking stories in the world. They say you should never talk about religion or politics, and I guess this story proves that right. Coming up next, we have Wrong Car. This one took place in 2016 in Brakpan, South Africa. A group of 4 guys were hitchhiking and were waiting ages for a lift. Finally, one guy on his own pulled up and offered them a ride. They were driving for a while and all was normal, when all of a sudden they saw a cop car driving behind them. They thought nothing of it, but then realized the driver wasn't pulling over, but instead he was speeding up. The hitchhikers were freaked out, and it turned out the man who picked them up was actually driving a stolen car. Eventually, the police rammed them off the road and arrested them all, including the innocent hitchhikers. The hitchhikers were eventually let go when the robber was sent to prison. But why would a carjacker pick up a group of hitchhikers? Well, when the people reported the stolen car to the cops, they would have said he was on his own. The South African cops didn't buy this, however, and the guy paid the price. Thankfully, the hitchhikers were let go, but it must have given them the fright of their lives. You'd better watch out who you hitchhike with, as it could land you in jail. Next up is Canyon Drive. Hitchhiking does work out for some people depending on who they're hitchhiking with. However, one kind of person who you should never hitch a ride with is a crazy man. One day a man in the USA wanted to get from his town to his hometown where his mom lives. He decided to hitch a ride as he didn't have money for a long bus journey and didn't own a car. Eventually a man pulled up and let him ride with him. The guy told him where he was going and the guy said it was okay, however he didn't seem to be driving in the right direction. He then began speeding up while the guy was in the car with him. They then approached a canyon and the guy drove straight off it. You see, the driver wanted to take his own life and had been planning to drive off the canyon anyway, but it seems that when another guy was asking for a lift, he decided to take his life too. Remember guys, if you have to to hitchhike, then be sure not to do it with a crazy man. Is this story more sad or scary? I can't tell. Next up is 1983 Hitchhiker Slayings. This is a very notorious event in American history. One day in 1983, a guy named Randall Shoptweez was making his way to Alaska from New York. He was 18 years old at the time and was traveling to try and get oil rich. Two men driving around had been drinking all day and decided to rob Randall instead of picking him up. They pulled over, but Randall resisted them trying to steal his stuff. One thing led to another, and the guys ended up cutting off Randall's head. They left his head on the road, and after a short time, the two were found by the cops and sent to jail. They still remain behind bars today. It was also a story that shook the United States and is the reason for many people to never hitchhike again. Randall went out to try and get rich on Alaskan oil, but sadly hitchhiking caused him to lose his head. This sure is a scary story which took place in upstate New York. This really shows that you don't have to be in the outback or a desert for a hitchhiking experience to go terribly wrong. Coming up next is the Alphabet Slayer. This is one of the scariest people to ever pick up hitchhikers. The guy's real name was Joseph Naso, and he was a 79-year-old photographer. However, his nickname was the Alphabet Slayer. This is because of his crimes committed against hitchhikers. He would take the lives of hitchhikers, but not just any hitchhikers. He would make sure they had names featuring the same first and last letter. He would pick them up and take their lives soon after. However, in 2010, he was finally arrested. But how did they do it? Well, it seems Joseph either was a dumb criminal or wanted to get caught, as he threw out a diary of his crimes and locations of where he left the people. Detectives found this at a dumping ground while investigating something unrelated. After that, it didn't take them too long to track him down, and he's still locked up today. They later found out he had anywhere between 6 and 10 victims over the span of 1977 to 1994. He'd given up his criminal career in 1994, and he thought he'd got away with it. Little did he know he'd finally be caught and in prison 16 years later. And behind bars in the New York prison he's in, his nickname is Crazy Joe, and I can see why. Next up is car purchase. One man was traveling along a road in Poland one day. He was actually on his way to buy a new car after his one was stolen from his home the day before. He was walking along the long road to the car shop and it was cold out. So when a man pulled up and offered him a lift, he couldn't believe his luck. However, he soon found out it doesn't pay to accept a ride from a stranger. In the car were two kids. One was 8 and the other was 6 months old. The driver, who was the kid's uncle, demanded the guy's money and he gave it to them. But the driver then pulled a knife out and tried to take the man's life before kicking him out of the car. Thankfully, another car came down the road and dialed 999 for an ambulance. The ambulance got there just in time to save the man's life. That is lucky, but he still paid the price for accepting a ride from a stranger. And it's also very ironic that he was on his way to buy a car when he got badly injured while hitchhiking. Next up is Sonoma Valley Slayings. In the 1970s, Sonoma Valley, California was thought to be the perfect spot for hitchhiking. But really, in the years 1972 to 1979, it was a place where many hitchhikers passed away. Around 8 women from the ages of 13 to 20 were found to have their lives taken. The scariest thing is that no one ever found out who was behind this. And the reason why that is because it was all done by the Zodiac. The Zodiac is the most famous American life taker with around 37 victims. However, he's never been identified, and not even his state is known. Some say it was Arthur Leigh Allen, but nobody's really sure of the Zodiac's true identity. Do you think the Zodiac was behind the incidents in Sonoma Valley, or was it somebody else? And do you agree with the theory saying that Arthur Leigh Allen was actually the Zodiac? Check out the poll in the top red corner and you can vote for the scariest hitchhiking story on this list. And on a lighter note, have a look at my second channel, The Crafty. There'll be a life hack video on screen in a moment, so click it to check it out. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.